A veteran and his dog dug in the backyard. They never expected this discovery. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. The sun was just beginning to set, casting a warm, golden light over the small, quiet town in the Midwest. In the backyard of an old farmhouse, a veteran named Michael and his loyal German shepherd, Scout, were preparing for a seemingly routine task. Michael had returned home after years of service in the military, and though the world had changed, the land he lived on remained the same. The house, once a place full of memories of family gatherings and laughter, now stood mostly silent. His wife had passed away a few years ago, and his children had grown up and moved out. But Michael and Scout had become a team, moving through life together, each day quietly unfolding before them. As Michael stood by the back door, he looked over at Scout, who was sniffing around the corner of the yard, tail wagging slightly. The dog had always been alert, his sharp instincts never letting him miss a thing. Michael smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over him as he grabbed the shovel. It was a small task for the day, a bit of gardening, maybe fixing the fence or digging up a few old roots that had started to show. Scout, as usual, was eager to help, his nose already buried in the dirt. As they began digging near the old oak tree, something unusual caught Michael's eye. The ground here had always been solid and dry, but now, as his shovel struck something hard, a low clink echoed through the yard. Michael paused for a moment, pushing the dirt aside with his hands. There it was, a small metal box, half buried and rusted from years of neglect. Scout growled softly, his amber eyes locked on the object, as if sensing that it was not just any ordinary find. Michael's curiosity piqued. He crouched down and pried the box from the earth. The air around him seemed to hold its breath. What could it be? The metal was old, but sturdy, covered in dirt and grime. He gently wiped it off and found a small engraving on the lid, faint, but legible. His heart skipped a beat. The initials were unfamiliar to him, but they seemed important, like a piece of history that had been hidden away for far too long. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he tried to open the box. It was locked, but with a quick glance around, he found a rusty key on the ground nearby, almost as if it had been placed there just for this moment. It was an odd coincidence, but Michael didn't question it. With a deep breath, he inserted the key into the lock and turned. The box creaked open, revealing something that would change his life forever. Michael stared at the small metal box in his hands, his heart racing with anticipation. His fingers shook slightly as he turned it over, inspecting the engraving. The initials were old, worn by time, but still legible. They read, Yim. He had never heard of anyone by those initials, but something about them felt oddly familiar, like a piece of a puzzle he had yet to solve. He glanced down at Scout, whose amber eyes were fixed on the box, as if the dog knew there was more to this than just an old, forgotten object buried in the yard. The rust on the box told a story of years, perhaps decades, spent hidden from the world, waiting for someone to uncover its secrets. Michael wiped the dirt from the lid and opened it slowly, half expecting it to be empty or full of useless trinkets. But inside, he found something entirely unexpected. There was no dust, no decay, just a collection of perfectly preserved papers. Michael carefully pulled them out one by one, his curiosity growing with each new discovery. The first was a map, old and fragile, but still clear enough to see a route marked in red ink. It seemed to lead to a nearby part of the forest, an area Michael had walked past countless times, but had never ventured into. The second item was a small photograph, faded with age. In the picture, a man stood beside a large, ornate building. The man was dressed in what looked like military attire, but there was no mistaking the look of pride in his eyes. Beside him, a woman stood, her hand resting on his arm. She looked familiar, but Michael couldn't place her. Something about her face struck him with a feeling of recognition, though he was certain he had never seen her before. The photograph had been taken long ago, but the faces were clear, as if they were captured in a moment frozen in time. The third item was a letter, folded neatly, and carefully tucked into the corner of the box. Michael unfolded it with great care, unsure of what he would find. The handwriting was elegant, flowing across the paper in a way that spoke of sophistication and purpose. The letter was dated from decades ago, and as he read it, he realized that it was addressed to someone named Samuel, though the last name was smudged, possibly from exposure to moisture. It mentioned a hidden fortune, a legacy of sorts, that had been left behind after a tragic event. The letter spoke of a hidden inheritance, one that was to be passed down to the rightful heir, someone who would find the clues and follow the map. Michael's eyes widened as he read on. The letter described a treasure hidden deep in the forest, something that had been kept secret for generations, hidden away from prying eyes. The fortune was not just money, but something much more valuable, an artifact that had been lost to time, waiting for the right person to rediscover it. Michael's mind raced. Could this be real? Could there really be a hidden treasure right here, on land that he had owned for years? He thought back to the house, to the land, to the small town that had seemed so ordinary until now. It all felt too surreal to believe, but the pieces were adding up. He glanced down at the map again, noting the markings and the detailed route that seemed to point toward the exact part of the forest where he had never thought to look. There was no denying it now. This was no coincidence. The box, the map, the letter, everything pointed to something hidden right in his backyard. Michael knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. He could feel it in his gut. But where would he even begin? He had no idea what he would find, or what it all meant, but one thing was certain. His life was about to change forever. As Michael sat back on the ground, still holding the letter and staring at the map, Scout nudged his hand, as if reminding him that they were in this together. Michael smiled faintly and patted the dog's head. "Looks like we've got work to do, boy," he said softly. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the yard, but Michael's thoughts were elsewhere. He had a feeling that tomorrow would bring a new adventure, one that would lead him to a discovery that would change not only his life, but perhaps the fate of the land he called home. Michael woke up the next morning with the map still on his mind, the letter folded carefully in his jacket pocket. The day was gray, a steady drizzle falling from the overcast sky, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Scout was already at the door, wagging his tail, ready for the day's work. Michael knew today wouldn't be like any other day. The discovery from yesterday had sparked something inside him, something he couldn't ignore. He had to follow the map. He had to find out what it led to. After a quick breakfast, Michael grabbed his shovel and tucked the map into his jacket. Scout followed closely, eager as always. The forest behind the house was dense, the trees towering high above, their thick trunks creating a canopy that blocked out most of the sky. It was a peaceful place, quiet and still, the kind of place that invited deep thinking. Michael and Scout had often walked here before, but today felt different. Today, every rustling leaf and snap of a twig seemed to carry a sense of urgency. Michael walked with purpose, his boots crunching softly against the wet ground. Scout trotted ahead, nose to the ground, picking up scents that Michael couldn't even begin to understand. They followed the path marked on the map, walking deeper into the forest, past the familiar clearing where Michael used to bring Scout to play. As they ventured further, Michael began to notice that the trees were growing thicker, the underbrush denser. The path wasn't as clear as it had been, but the markings on the map were still accurate. The red ink that had been drawn on the map years ago was leading them in the right direction. Michael's thoughts wandered back to the letter he had read the night before. The mention of a hidden fortune had stayed with him. It seemed too surreal to be true, but the more he thought about it, the more he felt that this treasure, whatever it was somehow tied to him, to his family, to the land. There had been so many unanswered questions in his life, especially since his wife had passed. Maybe this was the answer he had been waiting for. He pushed the thoughts aside and focused on the task at hand. As they neared the location marked on the map, Michael could feel his heart racing. The trees opened up to reveal a small, secluded area, a perfect circle of dirt surrounded by thick foliage. Michael crouched down and scanned the ground. There was nothing remarkable about it, just a patch of earth, damp from the rain. But something told him this was where the map had been leading him. He set down his shovel and began to dig. At first, the earth was soft, but as his shovel hit something hard, his heart skipped a beat. He cleared away the dirt, revealing a large, weathered stone. It looked like a slab of rock, but there was something about it that didn't quite fit with the natural surroundings. Michael crouched down, studying it. The stone was heavy, and it appeared to have been placed there intentionally. With a grunt of effort, he used the edge of the shovel to pry the stone up. The sound of it scraping against the earth made him wince, but he didn't stop. The stone shifted, and with one final push, it gave way, revealing a hidden compartment underneath. Michael's breath caught in his throat as he peered into the dark space. It was deep, but not too deep, just enough to hide something. He reached in cautiously, his fingers brushing against something cold and smooth. Slowly he pulled it out. It was a small chest, made of wood, its surface covered in dust and dirt. Michael's hands trembled as he set it down in front of him. The chest was old, the wood faded and cracked, but it was unmistakably beautiful. There was no lock, no keyhole, but instead intricate carvings etched into the surface. Michael ran his fingers over the designs, feeling the history embedded in the wood. He knew without a doubt that this was the treasure from the map, the one mentioned in the letter. But what could it contain? What secrets did it hold? Michael's mind raced as he carefully opened the chest. Inside, he found not gold or jewels, but something even more remarkable. There were papers, old, faded documents that had been carefully preserved, a stack of them neatly folded. Michael's heart skipped a beat as he reached for the first one, his hands shaking. The paper felt brittle beneath his fingertips, but he unfolded it with care. The writing on the document was elegant, the ink a deep black, still legible despite the passage of time. It was a deed, a property deed, but not just for any land. It was for a vast estate, one that stretched across hundreds of acres, an estate that Michael didn't recognize. The deed was signed by someone named Edward Montgomery, a name that Michael had never heard before. But the more he read, the more he realized that this estate was somehow tied to his family's history. The name Montgomery rang a bell, a distant echo from stories his grandfather had told him as a child. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. This estate had been lost, hidden away, and now it was his. Michael sat back on his heels, the documents spread out before him. Scout sat beside him, sensing the change in the air. Michael had uncovered something that would alter his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The discovery was just the beginning, and as he stared down at the papers in front of him, he knew his life was about to take a turn he never expected. Michael sat there, the documents spread out in front of him, staring at the deed that had just revealed a long-lost family legacy. The weight of the discovery was sinking in, but something still didn't sit right with him. How had this estate remained hidden for so long? And why was it connected to his family? He glanced over at Scout, who was sitting by his side, calm as ever. The dog seemed to sense the gravity of the situation, his amber eyes watching Michael with quiet understanding. Michael knew there was no going back now. He folded the deed carefully and stuffed it back into his jacket, knowing that the journey ahead would be one that changed everything. With a deep breath, he stood up and dusted himself off. The rain had stopped, but the air still felt thick with the promise of something new. He had to know more. The map was clear, but there was something else, something the letter had hinted at, but never fully explained. Michael's thoughts raced as he began walking back toward the house. The woods behind him felt eerily quiet now, as though they were holding their breath along with him. It didn't take long before he reached the old farmhouse, its familiar shape standing against the sky. It was the same house he had lived in for years, but now it felt different, as if it held secrets he had never understood. As he entered the house, the cool air of the morning wrapped around him. The place was silent, save for the creaking of the floorboards beneath his feet. Michael made his way to the small study where he kept his father's old belongings. There, amidst boxes and papers, was a small chest, an old family heirloom passed down for generations. His father had always talked about the family's past, but Michael had never paid much attention. He was too focused on the present, too caught up in his own life. But now, as he opened the chest, he felt an unfamiliar sense of urgency. Inside, he found more old papers, photographs, letters, and journals that dated back to the early 1900s. One journal in particular caught his eye. It was leather-bound, its edges worn with age. He flipped it open, and as he read, he began to uncover the truth about his ancestors. The Montgomery family had once been wealthy landowners, but they had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The journal spoke of a hidden fortune, a treasure buried deep within the forest, a treasure that was meant to be passed down to the rightful heir. Michael couldn't believe what he was reading. This was it, the missing piece of the puzzle. The estate, the treasure, the legacy. It was all tied to him. He read on, learning about a secretive group that had been tasked with guarding the family's wealth. They had hidden it away from prying eyes, in case the wrong people came looking. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. Was he the rightful heir? Was this all meant for him? As he closed the journal, a strange sense of responsibility washed over him. This was no longer just about a discovery. It was about the future. He had to protect what was his, and that meant finding the treasure before anyone else did. He wasn't alone in this. The letter, the map, the journal, all of it pointed to one thing. The legacy was his to claim. Michael stood up, determined. Scout was by his side, his tail wagging, as if urging him on. Together, they would uncover the secrets of the past and reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The journey ahead would be difficult, and the challenges would be many, but Michael knew that he wasn't going to stop until he had answers. As he grabbed his jacket and headed back out the door, the weight of the decision settled on him. There was no turning back. This was his destiny. Michael woke up early the next morning, the weight of the discovery still fresh in his mind. He had stayed up late, reading the journal and trying to make sense of everything. The estate, the treasure, the legacy, it was overwhelming. But one thing was clear, he couldn't turn back now. Scout, as always, was at his side, his loyal companion ready for whatever the day would bring. The sky outside was still dark, but there was a sense of purpose in Michael's step. Today, he would take the next step in the journey. He could feel it in his gut. The treasure was out there, and he was going to find it. He grabbed the map, the journal, and the letter, carefully placing them into his jacket. After a quick breakfast, he grabbed a shovel and a few supplies. He wasn't sure exactly what he was looking for, but he knew he had to start somewhere. The map had led him to the forest, and that was where he would begin. As he walked through the yard, Michael glanced at the house one last time. It was the same house he had lived in for years, but now it felt like a place from the past, a place that no longer held the answers. The forest was calling him now, and he had to follow. Scout trotted ahead, sniffing the air, his tail wagging with excitement. Michael couldn't help but smile as he watched his dog. It was as if Scout understood the importance of this journey, as if he knew that this was more than just a search for treasure. It was a search for answers. The trees in the forest were thick and dense, their trunks towering high above. The path was narrow, winding through the underbrush, but Michael followed it with ease, the map in his hands guiding him every step of the way. The air was damp and cool, the scent of pine and earth heavy in the air. Michael felt at home here, in the stillness of the forest, surrounded by the ancient trees that had stood for centuries. As they walked deeper into the woods, Michael began to feel a sense of anticipation building inside him. He had no idea what he was looking for, but the map was clear. This was the place. The markings on the map led him to a clearing, a small, secluded spot surrounded by thick trees. It was quiet here, the only sound the rustling of the leaves in the wind. Michael paused, scanning the area. There was nothing unusual about the clearing at first glance. But as he looked closer, he noticed something. A large stone, half hidden by moss and vines, sitting in the center of the clearing. Michael's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the spot marked on the map. He approached the stone cautiously, his fingers brushing against the cold surface. It was smooth, almost unnervingly so, as if it had been carefully shaped by someone long ago. Michael crouched down, inspecting the stone more closely. It was big, too big to move easily, but it looked as though it could be shifted with some effort. He glanced at Scout, who was sitting quietly by his side, watching him with intense, knowing eyes. With a deep breath, Michael grabbed the edges of the stone and began to push. It was heavy, but slowly, inch by inch, it began to move. The earth beneath it shifted, and with one final push, the stone slid away, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Michael's pulse quickened as he looked into the dark space beneath the stone. It was deep, just enough to hide something, but what? He reached in, his fingers brushing against something cold. Slowly, carefully, he pulled it out. It was a metal box, old and rusted, but still intact. The box was heavy, its surface covered in dirt and grime, but Michael could feel the weight of something important inside. He set the box down on the ground and opened it carefully, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside, he found what he had been searching for, an old journal, its pages yellowed with age, and a small key. The journal was familiar. Its leather cover was worn and cracked, but it had the same intricate designs Michael had seen before. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. He opened the journal and began to read, his eyes scanning the faded words on the page. The journal told the story of Edward Montgomery, the man who had once owned the estate. It spoke of the treasure hidden deep within the forest, the same treasure that had been passed down through generations. But the journal also spoke of danger, of those who would stop at nothing to claim the treasure for themselves. Michael felt a shiver run down his spine as he read. This wasn't just about finding a hidden fortune. It was about protecting something that had been hidden away for a reason. The treasure was meant for someone, but that someone had to be worthy of it. Michael closed the journal, his mind racing. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was certain. This was only the beginning. The road ahead would be dangerous, and he would have to be ready. With Scout by his side, Michael was determined to uncover the secrets of the past and protect the legacy that was rightfully his. The adventure had only just begun. Michael stood in the quiet forest, the old journal still in his hands. The pages felt delicate, as if they might crumble to dust at any moment, yet the information they held was too important to ignore. The story inside spoke of a treasure, yes, but also of an oath, a duty that had been passed down from one Montgomery generation to the next. This wasn't just a search for riches, it was a search for something that had been hidden for a reason. The danger that lurked within the pages of the journal was not to be underestimated. Michael had felt the weight of it the moment he discovered the treasure's location. It wasn't just about finding the fortune, it was about ensuring it stayed hidden from the wrong hands. As Michael stood there in the forest, Scout at his side, he realized the magnitude of what he had stumbled upon. This was no mere chest of gold or jewels. This was something far more valuable, an artifact that could change everything. But there were others who knew of its existence. Others who had been searching for it long before Michael had even discovered the first clue. The journal's entries were filled with warnings. It spoke of a secret society that had watched over the treasure for centuries, ensuring that it never fell into the wrong hands. And now, it seemed that Michael was the next person to be tested, to prove he was worthy of the inheritance that had been hidden for so long. His thoughts were interrupted by Scout, who suddenly stood alert, his ears pricked and his tail stiff. Michael turned, his senses immediately heightened. It wasn't just the dog's instincts that were on edge, it was something in the air. The forest felt different now, like it was holding its breath. Michael's heart pounded as he followed Scout's gaze. Through the trees, he spotted a figure, a man, tall and broad-shouldered, standing in the shadows. His face was obscured by the trees, but there was no mistaking the sense of purpose that radiated from him. Michael felt a surge of unease. He had been expecting this moment, but it still caught him off guard. This man, whoever he was here for the same reason Michael was. The treasure. The man stepped forward, his boots crunching on the dry leaves. Michael didn't move. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the two men sized each other up. The stranger's eyes were cold, calculating. Michael didn't recognize him, but he could tell from the man's stance that he was no stranger to danger. "You're looking for it too, aren't you?" the stranger asked, his voice low but clear, cutting through the stillness of the woods. Michael didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure what to say, but then he remembered the journal, the warnings about those who would stop at nothing to claim the treasure. This was it. This was the moment he had been preparing for. "I'm not looking for trouble," Michael said, his voice steady, his hand instinctively resting on the shovel at his side. "But if you're after what I think you are, you'd better turn around and walk away." The stranger chuckled, a dark, humorless sound. "You think you're the only one who's been following the clues? The treasure doesn't belong to you. It never did." Michael's grip tightened on the shovel. He wasn't going to back down. "Not now. I'm not the one who decides who it belongs to," Michael replied, his eyes narrowing. "But I'm not letting you take it." The stranger's eyes flicked to the ground, scanning the area as if he was already plotting his next move. Michael could see the tension in the air, the charged silence that seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. Scout growled softly, standing at attention, his body tense. The stranger looked at Michael, sizing him up once more, and then took a step back. "I'll give you this one chance," the man said, his tone almost mocking. "But don't think for a second that this is over. There are others who won't be as understanding as me." With that, he turned and disappeared into the woods, leaving Michael standing there, his heart pounding in his chest. Michael stood still for a moment, his mind racing. He had known there would be obstacles, but he hadn't expected this. The journal had warned him of danger, but now it felt more real than ever. Someone else was after the treasure. Someone who would stop at nothing to claim it. As the sounds of the stranger's footsteps faded, Michael knew this was just the beginning. He couldn't afford to waste time. The treasure was within his reach, but so was danger. And Michael wasn't sure who he could trust, or who he would have to fight to keep what was rightfully his. Michael walked back to the farmhouse with a heavy heart, his mind racing after the confrontation in the woods. The stranger's words echoed in his mind, a warning he couldn't shake. There were others who knew about the treasure, and they weren't going to stop until they had it. Michael felt the weight of the journal and the map in his jacket, both symbols of a legacy he was now responsible for. He could no longer pretend that this was just an ordinary treasure hunt. This was something much bigger, a test of whether he was truly worthy of what he had found. Scout trotted beside him, sensing his unease, his eyes darting between the trees. Ever watchful, Michael's thoughts turned to the journal again, the warnings it contained. The treasure had been hidden for a reason. It wasn't meant to be found by just anyone. There were forces at play, forces that had been protecting it for centuries. But who were these forces? And why had they allowed him to find it? He didn't know the answers yet, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let anyone take it from him. As he reached the porch, Michael stopped. The house seemed different now. It was the same house he had lived in for years, but the sense of peace that had once filled it now felt distant. The discovery had changed everything. He stepped inside, Scout following close behind. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. Michael set the journal and the map down on the old oak table in the kitchen, his fingers still trembling slightly from the events of the morning. He needed a plan. He needed to understand what he was up against. He couldn't just rely on the map and the journal. He needed more information. Michael sat down, his gaze drifting over the stack of papers. The journal had mentioned a secret society, but it hadn't said much more than that. Who were they? What did they want? And why had they allowed him to find the treasure? Michael's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was a soft, hesitant knock, as if the person on the other side was unsure whether they should be there. Michael's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't expecting anyone. He stood up, his hand instinctively reaching for the rifle by the door. He opened it slowly, his mind racing with possibilities. Standing on the other side was a woman, tall and slim, with long dark hair and piercing green eyes. She was dressed in a worn leather jacket, and there was something in her demeanor that told Michael she wasn't here by accident. "I was hoping to find you here," she said, her voice low but steady. Michael didn't say anything, his gaze shifting from her eyes to the woods behind her. Was this another person after the treasure? "Who are you?" he asked cautiously, his grip tightening on the doorframe. The woman hesitated, then stepped forward, lowering her voice. "My name is Lena Fox," she said. "I know who you are, Michael Montgomery. And I know what you found." Michael's heart skipped a beat. How did she know his name? How did she know about the treasure? His mind raced with questions, but before he could speak, Lena continued. "I'm not here to take it from you," she said, as if reading his mind. "I'm here to help you, to warn you." Michael's brow furrowed. "Warn me? From what?" Lena glanced over her shoulder, as if making sure no one was watching. "There are people, dangerous people, who have been looking for that treasure for years," she said. "They will stop at nothing to get it. And now that they know you've found it, they'll be coming for you." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just some random search. There were real, dangerous people after the treasure, and they weren't going to stop until they had it. "Who are they?" Michael asked, his voice tense. Lena's eyes darkened. "A secret society. They've been guarding the treasure for centuries, and they won't let anyone take it without a fight. I've seen what they're capable of." Michael's mind spun. A secret society, a hidden treasure, and now, a warning from a stranger who seemed to know more than she was letting on. It was all becoming too much to process. But there was no denying it. He was in deeper than he had ever imagined. "Why are you telling me this?" Michael asked, his voice still uncertain. Lena stepped closer, her voice low. Because I'm not just a stranger. I've been watching them for years. I know their methods. And I know how to stop them. Michael studied her, trying to read her expression. He wasn't sure if he could trust her, but something in her eyes told him she was telling the truth. He had no choice but to listen. How do you know all of this? He asked. Lena took a deep breath, as if preparing herself to explain. My family has been tracking them for generations. We've been keeping an eye on their movements, trying to protect the treasure from falling into the wrong hands. But now, with you involved, it's more dangerous than ever. Michael felt a sense of urgency rise in his chest. This was no longer just about finding treasure. This was about survival. What do we do now? He asked, his voice steady. We protect the treasure, Lena said, her eyes hardening with determination. And we make sure they don't get their hands on it. The days that followed were tense. Michael and Lena worked quickly, preparing for what was to come. Lena, with her deep knowledge of the secret society and the methods they used, guided Michael through every step, her warnings still fresh in his mind. The treasure wasn't just about gold or jewels. It was a piece of history, and it was clear that whoever controlled it had the power to change everything. Michael had no intention of letting that happen. His mind was focused on one thing: protecting the treasure at all costs. The first step was to fortify the farmhouse. Michael had always considered the house a place of safety, but now it felt more like a target. They reinforced every window and door, securing the perimeter with whatever they had on hand. Michael even went as far as to set up traps around the property, not for anyone he knew, but for anyone who might come looking. He couldn't take any chances. Meanwhile, Lena worked tirelessly, organizing the papers and maps. There were things about the treasure, clues within the journal that Michael hadn't yet fully understood. She explained how the treasure was hidden in layers, with a series of challenges that would test anyone who attempted to find it. They've made sure no one can find it easily, Lena said one night, poring over the old journal. It's not just about brute force. It's about knowledge, patience, and timing. Michael sat across from her, listening intently. You said you've been tracking them for years, he asked. How do they find people like me? How do they know when someone is close to the treasure? Lena paused, her gaze intense. They don't just watch. They listen. They've been monitoring certain families for generations, watching for signs that someone will come along who is worthy, someone like you. Michael's stomach tightened. And now that they know I've found it, they'll come for me. They'll stop at nothing. Lena nodded. They're resourceful. They don't care who they have to use or manipulate to get what they want. Michael's grip on the table tightened. So what's the plan? Lena looked up from the journal, her eyes filled with determination. We move fast. We find the treasure before they do, and we make sure it stays hidden. There's a hidden location. The key is in the documents we found. The map is more than just a guide. It's a key that leads to the next part of the treasure's hiding place. Michael didn't need any more convincing. He trusted Lena, and he trusted his instincts. The time had come to act. They spent the next few days preparing, but Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every unfamiliar sound in the distance set him on edge. He couldn't afford to be caught off guard. It wasn't until one afternoon, when they were deep into the woods following the map, that the reality of their situation truly hit him. As they made their way through a dense thicket, Scout's ears perked up, and he growled softly, low in his throat. Michael turned to Lena, a questioning look on his face. She raised a hand, signaling him to stop. They both stood still, listening. For a moment, there was nothing, just the quiet of the forest. Then, Michael heard it. A distant crack, followed by another. He felt his heart race. They're close, Lena whispered, her face grim. We need to move. They quickly changed course, doubling back, but the forest seemed to close in on them. The air felt heavier, like something was following them, something just out of sight. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted. They reached a clearing and stopped to catch their breath. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the ground. As they surveyed the area, Michael noticed something strange. There was a small structure in the distance, partially obscured by the trees. It looked old, abandoned, perhaps. Lena's expression darkened. That's the place, she said quietly. The next clue is there. But it's also where they'll expect us to go. Michael felt a wave of unease wash over him. Are we sure it's safe? Lena hesitated before answering. No, but it's our best shot. They pressed on, making their way toward the structure. The closer they got, the more Michael's sense of urgency grew. He knew they had no time to waste. They had to beat the secret society to the treasure, or they'd never get another chance. As they neared the structure, Michael's breath caught in his throat. The building was half collapsed, the wood rotting and weathered by time. But as he peered inside, he saw something glinting in the dim light, an old chest hidden beneath the rubble. His heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the treasure. But as he reached for the chest, a voice suddenly rang out from behind them, cold and commanding. Step away from the chest. Michael froze, his hand hovering over the old chest. He turned slowly, his eyes locking onto a figure emerging from the shadows. The man was tall, dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by a hood. "Who are you?" Michael demanded, his voice steady despite the tension rising in his chest. The figure stepped closer, his voice a low growl. "You're too late. The treasure belongs to us." Michael's heart raced as he faced the cloaked figure in front of him. The man's cold voice echoed through the clearing, sending a chill down Michael's spine. "The treasure belongs to us." The words hung in the air, thick with the promise of danger. Michael's fingers curled around the edge of the old chest, his mind racing. Who were these people? And how had they found him here? "I don't think so," Michael said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "You've been following me, haven't you?" The stranger stepped closer, his boots crunching on the dry leaves. "We've been watching you since you uncovered the first clue. You've got something we need, Montgomery. Something your family has been protecting for generations." Michael felt Lena's presence beside him, but she remained silent, her eyes locked on the figure in front of them. She was ready to act, but they both knew that making the wrong move now could cost them everything. "What do you want with the treasure?" Michael asked, his grip tightening on the chest. "It's not yours." "It never was," the man replied, his voice low and menacing. "Your family was meant to guard it. But now, it's time to bring it back where it belongs." Michael's thoughts were a blur. This was the secret society Lena had warned him about, the ones who had been tracking the treasure for centuries. They were here now, and they weren't leaving without what they believed was rightfully theirs. "I don't think I'll be handing it over," Michael said, taking a step back, pulling the chest closer. Scout growled at the stranger, his fur bristling, but Michael could feel the tension in the air. This was no ordinary confrontation. The man before them wasn't just after riches. He was part of something much bigger, something dangerous. The figure's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "You really think you can stop us?" he sneered. "We've been preparing for this moment for centuries. You're just a small part of the puzzle." Michael's stomach tightened. He didn't know what they were after, but he knew it wasn't just about money. It was about power, control over something far more significant. The stranger took another step forward, but Lena suddenly moved. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small, but powerful-looking device. With one swift motion, she pressed a button, and a bright flash of light erupted from the device, blinding the man for a split second. "Now!" Lena shouted. Michael didn't hesitate. He grabbed the chest, his muscles straining as he lifted it off the ground. Scout barked loudly, rushing forward to defend his owner, his teeth bared. The stranger, disoriented by the flash, stumbled back, momentarily blinded. "You think a little trick like that will stop us?" he hissed, recovering quickly. But Lena was already ahead of him. She had dropped to the ground, her fingers moving swiftly, pulling a concealed map from her bag. "This is more than just a treasure," she said urgently, her eyes darting between Michael and the chest. "It's the key to something bigger, something they've been searching for. They'll do anything to get it." Michael's mind raced as he looked at the chest. There was no turning back now. They had to escape. "We need to go," he said, his voice firm. Now. They had no time to waste. The stranger was already recovering, his eyes narrowing with fury. "You can't outrun us," he growled. "You'll regret this." But Michael was already moving. He turned and ran, Lena close behind him, the chest heavy in his arms. Scout followed, barking furiously, his loyalty to Michael unwavering. The sound of footsteps behind them grew louder, but they didn't stop. They raced through the dense forest, dodging trees and branches, the fading light of the setting sun casting long shadows across their path. Michael's breath was heavy, his muscles aching, but he couldn't stop. Not now. The path ahead was familiar, the way to the farmhouse, but it felt like the longest stretch of his life. He could hear the stranger and his group gaining ground, their footsteps quickening. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees standing like silent sentinels, watching the chase unfold. "Lena, how much further?" Michael gasped, his lungs burning. "Just ahead," she replied, her voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. "We'll be safe once we're inside." They reached the edge of the forest, and Michael's eyes locked onto the farmhouse in the distance. It was still too far. The strangers were getting closer, their pursuit relentless. But as they reached the open field, Lena pulled ahead. She sprinted toward the old barn, a place Michael hadn't thought about in years. "In there," she shouted. They reached the barn just in time. Michael swung the doors open, barely taking a breath as he stepped inside. Lena quickly followed, pulling the doors closed behind them, the heavy wooden planks locking with a loud thud. They were safe, for now. Michael leaned against the barn wall, catching his breath, the chest still clutched tightly in his arms. He could hear the pounding of his heart in his ears, the adrenaline still coursing through him. Scout lay down at his feet, exhausted but vigilant. "We can't stay here long," Michael said, his voice low and steady. "They'll find us eventually." Lena nodded, her eyes dark with worry. "We need to keep moving. They'll be back with more people. And next time, they won't be so easy to shake." Michael's mind raced. They had the treasure, but it wasn't just a matter of escaping anymore. It was about survival, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep running. He looked down at the chest in his hands, knowing that whatever lay inside was more important than he could ever have imagined. The game had changed, and now they were all playing for keeps. The barn doors creaked as Michael and Lena leaned against them, catching their breath. The adrenaline was still coursing through Michael's veins, his heart hammering in his chest. He glanced at the chest resting beside him, the weight of it grounding him. The air inside the barn was cool, the scent of hay and old wood mixed with the faint smell of damp earth from outside. Scout sat by Michael's side, his ears pricked always. Alert, Michael rubbed his hand over his face, trying to steady his racing thoughts. They were safe for now, but how long would that last? He had the treasure, but the chase wasn't over. The stranger had made it clear that they weren't going to give up so easily. They would come for him again, and next time, they would come prepared. Lena stood near the barn window, her eyes scanning the open fields beyond. "We can't stay here long," she said, her voice tense. "They'll be back soon." Michael nodded. He knew it was only a matter of time before the secret society regrouped and figured out where they had gone. He glanced down at the chest. What was it about this treasure that made it so valuable? Was it just gold? Or was there something more, something that could change everything? "We need to keep moving," Lena continued, her voice hard with determination. "We've got a lead on where the next part of the treasure is hidden, but it's not going to be easy to get there. They won't let us walk away without a fight." Michael looked at her, his mind still spinning. "What's the next step?" "We need to get to the old ruins near the river," Lena said, pointing toward the maps spread out on the table. "That's where the final piece of the puzzle is hidden. It's been guarded for centuries. But now that we have the chest, we've got a chance to uncover it." Michael took a deep breath, nodding. He didn't know if he was ready for another fight, but he didn't have a choice. "Then let's go," he said, his voice steady. "We don't have much time." Lena gathered the map and stuffed it into her bag, her movements quick and efficient. Michael grabbed the chest, feeling the weight of it once more. It was strange, knowing that inside it was the key to something much bigger than himself. He wasn't just protecting the treasure now, he was protecting the future. They stepped outside, the air still cool, the clouds hanging low in the sky. Michael could feel the weight of the journey ahead pressing on him. The ruins were miles away, deep in the forest, and they would have to move quickly to get there before anyone else did. As they walked, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The forest, which had once felt like a refuge, now seemed like a trap, closing in on them with every step they took. He glanced at Lena, who was walking beside him, her eyes sharp and focused. "What do we do when we get to the ruins?" he asked, trying to keep his thoughts from spinning. "We find the hidden chamber," Lena replied. "It's underground, but we'll need the key to unlock it. That's where the final piece of the treasure is hidden, if it's still there." Michael felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "And if it's not? Then we find another way," Lena said, her tone unwavering. "We've come this far, and we're not turning back now." The sound of their footsteps was the only thing that filled the silence between them. Michael was focused on the path ahead, but his mind kept drifting back to the chest. What did it really contain? He knew there was more to it than just treasure. He had to believe that. As they approached the edge of the forest, Michael felt his heart rate pick up. The ruins were close, and he could see the overgrown stone walls through the trees. It was an old settlement, abandoned long ago, but it held the key to everything. They reached the ruins just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the stone walls. The air was thick with the scent of moss and earth. Michael looked around, scanning the area for any signs of movement. It was too quiet. He felt it then, the presence of someone else nearby. "Lena, get ready," he whispered. "We're not alone." She nodded, her hand reaching for the small device she had used earlier. Michael's fingers tightened around the chest as he scanned the surroundings. Suddenly, from the shadows, a figure appeared. A man, tall and cloaked, stepping out from behind a pillar. His face was obscured, but Michael knew who it was. It was the same man from the woods, the one who had followed them before. "I told you," the man said, his voice cold and menacing. "The treasure isn't yours. It never was." Michael didn't hesitate. "We'll see about that," he said, his grip on the chest firm. The man smirked, stepping closer, but Michael wasn't afraid. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to let anyone take what was his. The stranger reached into his coat, pulling out a small, intricate device. "You think you can stop us?" he sneered. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Michael's heart pounded. The danger was real, and the time for talking was over. He tightened his grip on the chest and glanced at Lena. It was time to make their move. The cloaked figure stepped closer, the shadows wrapping around him like a second skin. His face remained hidden, but his presence was unmistakable. Michael's pulse quickened, but his resolve remained solid. This was the moment that would decide everything: the treasure, the fight, and the future. The man's lips curled into a sneer as he raised the device in his hand. It was small, almost inconspicuous, but Michael could sense the danger it posed. "You really think you can stop me?" The man's voice was dripping with arrogance, his eyes gleaming with dark intent. "I've been hunting this treasure for too long to let a few amateurs get in my way." Michael didn't move an inch, but inside, his mind was racing. Lena, standing at his side, didn't flinch either. She was calm, but Michael could see the readiness in her posture. This was it, the confrontation they had been preparing for. The stranger pressed a button on the device, and a low hum filled the air. Michael's eyes narrowed as the energy around them shifted. The air seemed to grow thick, almost suffocating, as the strange device began to emit a pulsing light. "This is just the beginning," the man continued, stepping closer. "You can't outrun what's been set in motion. The treasure belongs to us, and you're only delaying the inevitable." Lena moved first, her eyes locking onto Michael's as if sharing some silent understanding. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small metal object, a key, just like the one they had found earlier. Michael's heart skipped a beat as he realized what she intended to do. The key was meant for a lock, one that had been hidden deep within the ruins. It was the final piece, the key to unlocking everything. Michael's grip on the chest tightened. He knew what they had to do now. "Lena, get to the chamber," he said, his voice low but urgent. She nodded without hesitation, moving swiftly toward the stone archway at the back of the ruins. The stranger saw her. "Move," and growled. "You think you can just leave with it?" He lunged forward, but Michael was faster. Without warning, he swung the chest toward the man, using it as a shield. The stranger's body collided with it, throwing him off balance for just a moment, but it was enough for Michael to push forward. "Lena now," Michael shouted as he sprinted toward the archway, the chest in his arms. Behind him, he could hear the stranger recovering quickly, his footsteps following with dangerous speed. Lena was already at the entrance to the hidden chamber, the key in her hand. She inserted it into the lock, the metal grinding against the stone. Michael reached her just as the door opened with a creaking sound, the darkness beyond swallowing them up. They stepped inside, the heavy chest still in Michael's arms, and Lena quickly shut the door behind them. Inside, the air was cold and still, and the faint sound of distant water echoed through the chamber. It was a hidden sanctuary, untouched for centuries, and Michael could feel the weight of its history pressing in on him. "We have to hurry," Lena said, her voice barely a whisper. She moved toward a stone pedestal in the center of the room, where a small compartment lay open, revealing a narrow passage beneath. "This is it," she continued, "the final resting place." Michael set the chest down and stepped forward, his heart pounding as he watched Lena approach the pedestal. The treasure they had been searching for was right there, hidden in plain sight, but the danger was far from over. They had to unlock the final mystery, the piece that would give them control of the treasure. Lena placed the key into the pedestal's mechanism, twisting it slowly. The stone beneath them rumbled, and Michael's breath caught in his throat. Slowly, the compartment opened wider, revealing a hidden vault beneath. It was the kind of treasure chamber that belonged in legends, but Michael wasn't focused on the riches inside. His mind was fixed on one thing: protecting the legacy of his family, keeping the treasure safe from the people who would stop at nothing to take it. As the vault door finally gave way, Michael stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the contents inside. There, in the dim light, lay an ancient artifact, glowing with an eerie light, its shape unlike anything he had ever seen. But before he could take a step closer, the ground shook, and the chamber door slammed shut with a deafening thud. The sound of footsteps reached their ears, heavy, deliberate, and fast. The stranger had followed them inside. "You can't keep it from us," he hissed from the darkness, his voice filled with venom. "The treasure is ours, and you will never stop us." Michael didn't flinch. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to back down now. He glanced at Lena, who stood beside him, her face set in grim determination. "This is the final test," she said quietly. "We have to decide whether we fight for it or leave it behind." Michael's grip tightened on the chest. He knew what he had to do. "We fight," he said, his voice firm, as he prepared to face the stranger once and for all. The ground continued to shake beneath Michael's feet, the rumble of the chamber reverberating through the walls. His heart was pounding, not just from the adrenaline of the chase, but from the weight of what was about to unfold. The stranger's voice echoed in the dark, each word dripping with menace. "The treasure belongs to us, Montgomery. You've made a mistake thinking you could control it." Michael's eyes darted toward the artifact, still glowing softly in the center of the room. They had come this far, and now they were being forced into the ultimate confrontation. He wasn't going to back down, not now, not ever. Lena stood by his side, her face set with the same resolve. She had lived for this moment. She had prepared for it her whole life. She reached for her bag, pulling out a small device that looked like a handheld transmitter. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "They know we've found it, and they'll be coming with everything they have. We need to activate the security protocols now." Michael nodded, his fingers still gripping the chest. He could feel the weight of everything pressing down on him. This wasn't just about protecting the treasure. It was about protecting the legacy of his family, about ensuring that the wrong hands didn't gain access to something that could change the world. "Do it," he said. Lena pressed a button on the device, and a soft beep echoed in the room. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sudden, violent lurch, the ground shifted again. The walls of the chamber began to glow with an eerie blue light, and Michael felt a strange, magnetic pull emanating from the artifact. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice tight with tension. "The artifact's energy is activating," Lena said, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. "It's responding to the security system." Michael didn't know what that meant, but he knew one thing for sure. They couldn't let the stranger reach them now. The figure in the shadows moved closer, his presence filling the room with a dark, oppressive energy. "You think you can stop us? We've been preparing for this moment for generations. We know the secrets of the treasure, and we will take it, one way or another." Michael squared his shoulders, stepping forward. "Not while I'm here." The stranger stopped in his tracks, a sneer forming on his lips. "You don't understand, do you? This treasure is not just a prize, it's a weapon. And once we have it, we will be unstoppable." Michael felt a chill run down his spine, but he refused to let it show. He had no intention of letting this stranger, or anyone, take control of what he had uncovered. "You'll never get it," Michael said, his voice steady despite the fear rising in his chest. "I won't let you." The stranger took another step forward, and Michael felt the tension in the air snap. Without warning, the man lunged, his hand reaching for the chest. Michael instinctively pulled it away, but before he could react, the stranger was upon him. There was a brief struggle, Michael fought to hold on to the chest, but the stranger was stronger, more experienced. The man shoved Michael to the ground, and for a moment, everything seemed to blur. But Michael wasn't going to give up. He pushed himself up, and in one fluid motion, he reached for the small device Lena had activated earlier. With a swift motion, he slammed his hand down on it, sending out a burst of energy that knocked the stranger back. The man staggered, surprised by the force of the blast, but he quickly recovered, a look of pure rage in his eyes. "You think you can stop me with this?" the stranger snarled, his voice laced with fury. Michael's breath was ragged, his heart still racing. He wasn't sure how long he could keep this up, but he wasn't going to stop fighting. "You're not getting away with this," Michael said through clenched teeth. But just as the stranger started to move toward him again, Lena stepped in front of Michael, her face hardened with determination. "Enough," she said, her voice sharp and commanding. The stranger paused, looking at her with a mix of confusion and anger. "You're still protecting him?" the man growled. "You think he's the one who deserves it?" Lena didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a second device, larger than the first. This one looked more complicated, and Michael could tell it was meant for something more than just defense. "Lena, what is that?" he asked, his voice filled with awe and fear. "It's the failsafe," she replied quietly, her fingers moving deftly over the controls. "If we can't stop him now, this will erase everything. Destroy the artifact, the treasure, and all the information connected to it. It will wipe the slate clean." The stranger's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing his face for the first time. "You wouldn't dare," he spat. "You have no idea what's at stake." Lena's gaze was unwavering. "I'm willing to take that chance." Michael's heart skipped a beat as he realized what she was doing. She wasn't just protecting them from the stranger, she was willing to destroy everything to keep it safe. The artifact, the treasure, and the power it contained. It was all too dangerous to let fall into the wrong hands. The stranger lunged once more, but Lena pressed the button on the device. There was a loud, pulsing sound, and the air seemed to thicken, crackling with energy. The chamber began to shake violently, and Michael felt the walls closing in. The treasure was about to be lost to them, but at least they would keep it safe from the darkness that wanted to claim it. The chamber rumbled as the device in Lena's hand emitted a final, piercing hum. Michael felt the weight of the decision pressing on him, his heart racing as the walls seemed to pulse with energy. The stranger stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief as the room began to shift around them. The force of Lena's failsafe had begun to take effect, and Michael knew that whatever happened next, there was no going back. "Lena," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "What's happening?" Lena didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were locked on the device, her fingers working furiously as the countdown continued to tick down. She was focused, determined, but Michael could see the strain in her face. "It's starting," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "Once this reaches zero, everything we've uncovered, will be erased. The artifact, the treasure, the knowledge, it will all be gone." Michael's stomach clenched. He couldn't let that happen, not after everything they'd been through. He glanced at the stranger, whose anger was slowly turning into panic. "You think you can stop me?" the man spat, his voice trembling with rage. "You're destroying everything." Michael stepped forward, his mind racing. "We're not destroying it," he said firmly. "We're making sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. You won't use it for your own power." The stranger's expression twisted in fury, but before he could respond, Lena's hand trembled as she held the device steady. "I'm sorry," she whispered, almost to herself. "But this is the only way." The countdown reached its final seconds. Michael braced himself for the shockwave, the destruction, the final release of energy that would seal the fate of the treasure and everything connected to it. The chamber was silent for a brief moment before the device let out a thunderous noise, and the entire structure seemed to shake. Michael felt the force of it in his chest, his ears ringing with the intensity of the sound. But then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The room went deathly quiet. The blue glow faded, leaving them in near darkness. Michael's breath was shallow as he slowly opened his eyes, unsure of what had happened. The stranger was gone. Lena was still holding the device, but her hands were shaking. She looked exhausted, drained by the power of what she had just done. Michael took a step toward her, his eyes searching hers. "Lena, is it over?" She nodded slowly, her face pale. It's over. The treasure's gone. The artifact, everything. Michael felt a mix of relief and loss. They had succeeded in protecting the treasure, but the weight of the decision hit him hard. He had come so close to finding something that could change everything, and now it was all gone. But at what cost? He had saved it. Yes, but what had they lost in the process? Is it worth it? Michael asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Lena turned to him, her expression softening. We did what we had to do. The world wasn't ready for that kind of power. We couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. Michael looked down at the chest, now empty, the weight of it suddenly feeling so much lighter. I understand, he said, though the emptiness inside him was hard to ignore. But what now? Where do we go from here? Lena took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging slightly. We keep going. There's more out there, more mysteries, more secrets that need to be protected. And we're the ones who will make sure they stay safe. Michael nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. The journey had changed him, but it had also opened his eyes to the bigger picture. The treasure may have been destroyed, but the legacy of his family, the mission to protect the world from the wrong hands, was far from over. As they made their way out of the ruins, Michael glanced back at the chamber one last time. It had been a place of secrets, of danger, but now it was just another part of the past. The road ahead was uncertain, but Michael knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, he would face it with the same determination that had carried him this far. He had learned that some treasures were meant to remain hidden, and some battles were worth fighting for. And with Scout by his side, Lena at his back, and a new sense of purpose in his heart, Michael was ready to face whatever the future held. Veteran stories often touch on themes of courage, resilience, and unexpected discoveries, and this tale is no exception. As Michael, a war veteran, embarks on a journey to uncover a hidden treasure, his path leads him into a world of secrets, danger, and hidden legacies. With his loyal dog Scout by his side, Michael delves into a mystery that's been waiting to be discovered for generations. As the story unfolds, Michael faces powerful forces determined to claim the treasure for themselves. But in the end, it's not just about finding riches. It's about protecting a legacy that could change the world. Through intense challenges and unexpected encounters, Michael's courage and determination shine through, proving that sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones we protect. This story is a unique addition to the collection of veteran stories, highlighting the complex journey of a man who's not only fighting for survival, but for something far greater. As Michael makes difficult decisions and navigates the complexities of loyalty, legacy, and power, his story resonates with anyone who has ever faced an uphill battle. Through it all, Michael's unwavering resolve in the face of danger is a reminder of the strength that comes from within, especially for those who have served and sacrificed. If you're a fan of veteran stories filled with suspense, intrigue, and heart, this narrative will keep you on the edge of your seat. Michael's fight for the treasure is more than just a physical battle. It's a story of redemption, the search for truth, and a veteran's journey to protect what matters most. Dive into this thrilling adventure and explore the legacy of a veteran who discovers more than he ever imagined. This captivating tale is a must for anyone who loves veteran stories that blend mystery with personal growth.